everybody, and welcome to the next episode of Recruitment Revolution. I am delighted to be joined today by Natalie McMillan, who's the founder and managing director for McMillan Associates HR. They are an amazing HR consultancy based in York, and Nat has joined me today so we can basically put the world to rights about performance management, employees, and how to get more out of your staff in the current economic climate when costs are sort of increasing day to day. So welcome, Nat. Lovely to see you.
Hi, Kelly. Lovely to see you as well, and looking forward to our conversation and very much putting the world to right.
Absolutely. So before we start, for those of our audience who don't know who you are or who McMillan Associates are, tell us a little bit about your background, because you've had a vast background in HR and you've had your fingers in all sorts of pies.
Yeah, I have. So my background, I suppose, I've been a chief people officer, so board level HR director for a number of years, and set up, as you say, founder of McMillan Associates HR, just coming up for 7 years ago. And I think there's something really important for me about the ability to work with your clients with an understanding of what it's like to also run an SME, because it can be very easy for people like me to sit and talk to people kind of theoretically, right, about, well, you should do this and you should do that. And I think unless you've lived and breathed being an SME, all the realities that you and I will know about running your own business, right? Could use all the analogies, couldn't we, Kelly, of, it's a roller coaster, we were saying earlier, feast and famine and bumps in the road. It's definitely not for the faint-hearted. And I do know that what our clients value, and people from me, when I'm pretty forthright, as you know, I do think it's bringing in that experience and an empathy and an understanding of what it's like, because an SME is different to the corporate world. And I work in the corporate world as well. I sit on an NHS board. I work with board level people, and they are different, and you need to understand your different audience and their needs and the problems that they've got.
Absolutely. And I think the great thing about this podcast is our audience it's a broad plethora of business owners, business leaders, and they all have different challenges. And one of the things that keeps coming up is the people management part of it. And when there isn't necessarily HR in a business, or if they have HR, but actually there's one HR for 250 staff, and actually your hiring managers and your line managers need to do all of that. How do we improve the employees within the business so that they want to stay, they do stay, but they are super productive? And this is one of the biggest challenges I'm hearing in the current climate, that a lot of businesses are struggling with this. And, it sort of comes from NI costs going up, minimum wage costs going up, material costs are going up, and businesses are going, everything's going up, but I haven't got much more out of my people. So how do we improve profitability? How do we drive that growth internally with what we've got? And that's why I thought you'd be a good person to sort of speak to about that, because these will be some of the challenges that I know you kind of deal with on a day-to-day basis. So what are you seeing at the moment in the marketplace?
Yeah, so as you said, some people are concerned. There's also the employment rights bill, which is coming, the renewed one. And I'll just say right now, nobody quite knows exactly what's going to get through Parliament. So I always say to people, don't panic. Let's wait until it happens.
Yeah.
But a really important part of it is going to be managing the performance of your staff. Now, I don't think that should change anything, but perhaps it might heighten people's focus, shall we say, because there is a bigger risk coming, the old kind of 2-year rule and unfair dismissal and all of that.
Yeah.
But for me, it's all about really good performance management. And that's not just about the carrot and when people aren't performing. So I absolutely talk to SME owners about, so what's your approach to performance in your business? So where's the carrot? Where's the stick? Where's the incentive and where's the consequences? So how are people absolutely clear about their individual accountability? So if you work for me, Kelly, what's my expectation of you? You're clear on it, and you have the autonomy to go and deliver that. And I think often what I see in SMEs is they'll say, well, we haven't got time to do that, and we're not a big corporate, and we don't need these big objectives and goals and targets. You do, because you can keep it very simple. I do it in my business. We set our goal for the business every year. We set our individual objectives that are all aligned to that, all flows upwards, downwards. It does not take us days and weeks. It isn't an industry. It takes us about a day to do the overall business. And of course, I'm engaging and involving people in it. Very important that people hear me say that. Engaging and involving, because people need to feel emotionally invested. But they're also very clear, what are the objectives? And my experience tells me that people like to have targets and goals.
Mm-hmm.
What they don't like is being penalised when they don't achieve them without the right support, equipment and ability to do them. But human beings, individuals like to know, if I work for you, Kelly says, so Nat, as a business, we want to turn over X amount. We want to do this many recruitment campaigns. You're going to run 6 of them this year. Great. And then you say to me, how you do that is largely up to you. You go do that. I trust you. That's how you drive my productivity and my delivery that fits with the business.
Yeah.
Might want to look at, people might want to look at whether there are bonuses and incentives, and we can talk about that as well in a moment.
Yeah.
But for me, you drive productivity with a positive approach that says, this is why you're important to the business. This is where we're going to go as a business, and people are behind it, invested in it. The flip side of that is when it doesn't work out. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that this is a perfect world like social media, where I can tell you that if you do all of this as an SME, it's going to go swimmingly, because it won't. There will be bumps in the road. There will be individuals. So you have to then have the discipline and the courage to address performance issues quickly and compassionately. And I firmly believe that you can be compassionate whilst also being very clear and holding to account.
And I
People
think that's
tend to
important.
avoid them.
Yeah, and I think it's important, the holding to account bit. I know we do similar to you. So we had a workshop at the beginning of the year, because our year starts in January. So we had a workshop and we reviewed what had been achieved last year and what I'd set as the goals for this year. But then as a team, we then discussed how are we, because every job's different, how are we going to get there? And it was brilliant. And then the team went, can we review this every month so we can see where we're getting, like what's going well, what can we tweak? And we've looked at everything from the systems to the little back office processes and procedures to what the outside world see, how they see it. Like, we've reviewed everything, and we review it every single month. And then we had a half yearly review to reflect and look at, okay, so do we need to change anything now for the second half of the year? What's the priority for that? And actually, that kind of getting, as you say, that getting them involved means that they're taking more accountability, because they know their involvement. They know that they've been part of the decision making, and they are more bought in because it's their ideas and I'm not preaching to them. So, ultimately, if somebody came up with an idea that we can't do, I would obviously absolutely say, on this occasion, we can't do it. But within the remit of your job, as long as the ideas are relatively, okay, try that, let's see what happens, then, it's like, right, we'll run with that, crack on, great idea, see how you get on with it. And then, reviewing. And I think that's really important. It's that, like you say, it's like, we've got these objectives, how are we going to get there? And then I'm going to hold you to account if we're not getting there, but that's what we need to do. And I think as a small business owner, like you say, it's not difficult. It's not as time consuming as what people think to put those things into place. You don't have to do a week of strategy meetings. It's it's not that at all, is it? I think what you touched on there, though, about that kind of Insta versus reality thing, You know, I've got a lot of clients at the moment that have got disengaged employees because everything has changed so much over the last 5 years. They've got these problem employees that, best will in the world, they're trying to do all of this, but those people are your problems. And it's like, okay, but how do I now hold them to account, and what do I do? How do I try and turn that around process? Or they actually do really want to keep them, and they kind of look at it and go, well, they were engaged once, what's changed? How do I deal with that? And I think that's important. Like you say, it's not everything's rosy, and you do get these bumps in the road. So how do we deal with these problem people to get them being productive? Because you know, at the moment, we need to get as much out of our staff as possible. It's challenging. How do we make our staff engaged and as productive as possible?
Yeah, we absolutely do. I mean, I think it's interesting, isn't it? I think people have an expectation that everybody is highly skilled in doing these conversations, and they're not.
Yeah.
So just like all of the skills, some people are naturally good at going into that space and having, you know, what I call a forthright and compassionate conversation. You have to be able to do both. Not everybody can do that. So even with all the training in the world, for some people, lots of reasons for it, they might just really avoid conflict, be unable to cope with it, find it awkward. I don't know. Perhaps not have the people skills to land it. It might be that the individual is neurodiverse and other things. So we really need to think about it in a much more rounded way about how do we equip our managers to do these conversations, because just asking somebody, well, you need to go and have a conversation and start performance management. Okay, what does that mean? Read the policy or read the handbook or Google it. My worst nightmare when people say that. And by the way, if people want to Google an AI, it's inaccurate on many occasions, and you probably will end up in a tribunal. But aside from that,
the AI thing, the amount of people I know at the moment who are using AI and going, how do I? And then it's like ChatGPT or whoever. And it is, I see loads of things on socials about, you know, put this into ChatGPT, which will tell you how to have a conversation with somebody about performance management or to have those difficult conversations. And it's like, it's not a person though.
And it's far more nuanced real life. So, you know, AI, ChatGPT is great as a starter for 10, but it cannot do weighting or proportionality. And of course, individuals is what we're talking about here. So I guess my first tip is don't avoid the conversation, but really think about the individual and what might be going on for them. So my opening will always be to be very clear with somebody about what's happening around whatever it is they're meant to be delivering, but what's the issue or what's the concern? And that's how I frame it. You know, I'm concerned about this, and perhaps it's not then usual performance, or, you know, I need to understand from you what's going on from your perspective. Do you need support? But what's happening? Because we can't continue with this performance or this output at this level. So what you've noticed is I've been very clear. What can I do? What can we do to support you? And we want to listen and understand. At the same time, as a small business, we can't tolerate this. So you're being very clear about we've got to move this, but what's going on? I mean, I could go through lots of examples where you have those conversations and you find out that actually something's going on with somebody that you didn't know about. You know, people can be a bit flippant about this, but there can be, goodness me, and where do you start? There can be people grief. I've certainly had individuals and found out from an individual that actually they were going through a health diagnosis, were absolutely terrified about what was going to come up, hadn't shared with anybody because they couldn't even work it out themselves. Now, if I just dived into a process of, right, this isn't where it needs to be, this is what you need to do, and if you haven't sorted it out in 4 weeks, we're going to meet again and I might sack you. Well, how on earth does that help anybody? So I think it's always getting that balance. But you can already tell from this conversation, it's something you need to invest time in to really understand your people skills and to do these conversations in a way that works.
Yeah.
And also, sometimes people need to get off the bus. So let's be straightforward about this as well. There can be sometimes those people, the problem child, that regardless, once we've spoken to them, perhaps we've found out there are things we can help, adjustments we can make, things that are going on. Sometimes there are people that it is not right. The business and the job that they're doing is just not right for them. And no amount of adjustment, compassion, consideration is going to change any of that. And I do think sometimes biting the bullet, as I call it, and having the conversation that says we're not working out, the kind of breakup conversation, as I call it.
It's not you, it's me.
Yeah, all of that. But just sometimes having the courage to know how to do that in a way. Yeah. And look, this might be a surprise for people, but in fact, only in the last month, it happens more regularly than people realise. We've just worked with an SME and met with one of their employees to have that conversation and say, it just doesn't feel like it's working. You don't seem to be thriving. What's going on? We don't think it's probably the right job. And the individual, completely truthful, this said, thank you. I am so relieved that that's been noticed. And then we had a conversation about, so how do we do this with dignity and respect? How would you want us to consider? How do we help you leave? But for me, seeing the relief on somebody who has been turning up for work, not enjoying it, not performing, the impact that's having on them, the impact on everybody else in the team, the impact on the business, the money that you're losing. I think often people have a belief in their head that conversation is going to be awful, that the person's going to shout at them, they're going to threaten a tribunal, they're going to do whatever. What I want people to hear from me is that's actually quite rare. That probably happens. Do you know what? I would probably be exaggerating if I said it happened in even a quarter of them.
Yeah.
I think it probably happens about 1 in 10. Most people, they usually want to make sure they've got a good reference, that they're leaving without a black mark against the name, and that they can go and find another job. It isn't that many people that want to take you to a tribunal. They often just want it to end and to be able to move on.
And I think that's important, that the fear of what if sometimes overshadows a business leader's ability to have them conversations, because it's the fear of the unknown, and nobody likes difficult conversations. Nobody likes conflict, and nobody likes to do that. But like you say, it's having an open, honest and transparent and empathetic conversation with that person. And if you've done everything you can to support them and it's not improved, they will know, because you've sat and had lots of different conversations with them about, okay, so what can we do to help you with this? If I do that, do you think that might help? What ideas have you got that we can, you've had all of them conversations. And then if it's not improved, they're not going to be shocked when you sit there and go, I'm not sure this is for you, because it's not come out of the blue. And I remember years ago, in a former business, I had a team member there, and in fact we were in probation still with them. So we were doing the regular one-to-ones, and the probation was like 6 months. So we'd got through the initial training and we were trying to do the job, and I was working with them month in, month out, and it wasn't improving. And there was lots of suggestions of, if we do this, if we do that, we change the training, we put them on extra training and all this kind of stuff. And in the end, it was a final review, and we sat there and I didn't even have to say it. And they just said, I don't think this is for me. I'm not getting it. And I said, no, I don't think it is. And they were like, do you mind if I leave today? And I went, if that's what you want, that's absolutely fine. But they came to that conclusion because at every step of the way, they knew what was coming. They knew that they weren't doing it because we were talking about it, but it was in a human way. And it's not, I think it's not judging them. It's having just open and transparent conversations, isn't it? And that's what's important, is you're a human and so are they.
Yeah, I mean, I often say if people really learnt the art of conversation, I wouldn't have a business. because we're talking about productivity and performance here, but you could say that about so many issues. When we do mediation and conflict with people, time and time again, I think if you'd had the conversation 12 months ago, and I talk about a kind of misstep, because I genuinely believe sometimes it's just a misstep. So it's a perception that I think you've said this, you think I've said that. And if we just said, sorry, I don't know if I quite understood what you said to me yesterday, and it made me feel a bit like this, there's every chance that you're going to go, oh, that's not what I meant at all. I just meant this. Oh, okay. A misstep and a misunderstanding. And I think what happens around productivity, I also think people are afraid to use that word.
Yeah.
Because I've had that challenge to me of, oh, that sounds very dehumanizing. And you're talking about people as if they're widgets. No, I'm not. I'm talking about productivity of individuals, which is thinking about a person holistically. So as a whole individual and as part of the business. And the reality is, and I'll say this to new business owners, you haven't got a business if you aren't turning over, you haven't got cash flow, and you're not making profit. So don't kid yourself. And whilst I absolutely would hope that my team, who knows, they might watch this podcast and disagree, but I would absolutely want my team to feel part of a thing, a culture, a kind of environment where we're all part of it and we're in it together. But I'm also very clear with them that we are a business. And, there are lots of things that get in the way. And I've again worked with a client where I was worried about the fact that everybody talked about how it felt like a family. Now, you might think, well, that sounds great. And a lot of people do. But you've got to be very alert to the fact that that's a double-edged sword, because absolutely we can have a friendly working place and we can have laughs and we can trust each other and we can talk about lots and lots. But you also have to recognize you're a business and also you're the boss, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm the managing director. You're in charge. You're the business owner, because there may be times that we need to make decisions that are about the business. And I think that's my other advice, is be really careful from the beginning and very explicit that I absolutely want to look after everyone. I want us to have fun. I want us to socialize. I want people to come and talk to me. At the same time, it's with the boundary that we are a business and we have to make money, which means we have to be productive, because every single person has a salary which costs the business. And what's wrong with being open about that?
No, and I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot of small businesses that I've worked with who use that, oh, we're like a family, everybody gets on really well together. But it's fine until somebody's not performing, and then they can't have difficult conversations because they're a family and they've never managed. They've all worked together, but they've never been managed because the owner, manager, or whoever it is has always just been best friends with everybody. So I think, it's not that you can't be friends with the people that you're working with. You absolutely can, and you want to all get on really, really well, because that's a positive culture. But as you say, you've still got to be able to draw the line and go, but this is your business, you're the leader, you make them decisions, and you've got to be prepared and to be able to discuss that. And when it is a business, ultimately, if that business isn't making money, those people are going to be out of a job. So reminding them that if you don't do what we need to do, and if you are not productive, there aren't going to be any jobs. So we've all got to kind of drive things forward. And I think you used the term of the bus before. Everybody's got to be on your bus, driving it forward, which is a great analogy. I use a train, got to come on the train with me. But it's that, they're either on it or they're off it, aren't they? And if they're off it, they shouldn't be there. But if they're on it, it's how do we, in the current climate, if people are working and they're doing well, how do we now go, right, how do I get you from good to great? How do I improve that productivity? Because I think what's happened since the pandemic, where everybody got sent home and everybody was working from home, and it was great. Everybody was super productive working from home because it was brand new. And then over the years since then, productivity has dipped for those people that are working from home. And now a lot of my clients, and I'm not sure whether you're seeing this, a lot of my clients want everybody back in the office because productivity has dipped. So they want to be able to kind of control that, drive it forward. They think that, you know, people aren't part of that culture, they're not embedded in it. It's increasing their staff turnover because people don't feel part of it because they've been at home. So at the moment, there's that challenge of, they were productive, it has dipped. And I'm using this stereotypically because it's not for everybody. Some people are still super productive at home. Absolutely. But there is a lot that haven't been, and it's not intentional. Habits change, and you'll sit at home and you might go, oh, I'm just going to put a load of washing on, and oh, I've got the dog to walk. And suddenly, you know, that lunch 15 minutes becomes half an hour, it's an hour, it's an hour and a half. And then instead of taking, you know, doing whatever you're doing something else because you're at home and other jobs come, and or you've got nobody pushing you. So things take longer to do because there's no colleagues next to you. And so now everybody's back in the business. I've got business leaders who are going, how do I increase this productivity? I've got them back, but they're not where they were. So, and everybody's forgotten how to manage that because it all went virtual. And I think we're in this challenge now of, how do we get people back to the level that they were? But actually, we've got to get that higher now because of the cost of everything.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to having that relationship and those regular meetings where you talk about the business. You know, I know some people have been a bit shocked with the level that I share with my team. So I talked about the fact that we have our yearly objective setting. We also have a quarterly away day, and we go through the numbers.
Yeah.
What you measure gets done.
Absolutely.
Yes, it's an age-old mantra because it works.
Yeah.
You know,
we talk about that all the time. What gets measured gets done. Share your numbers. We do it every single day, every week, every month. We all know what the numbers are, and we know where we are against them. So it's true.
Yeah, us too. And you know, we worked remotely for a long time as a business, partly because we were setting up. So, you know, I wasn't going to buy an office in the first year. That would be slightly reckless. But I do think there's a balance, isn't there, you know, around that remote and in person. And look, I get that there are preferences. I get there's lots of reasons behind it. What's happened to us as a business is we've naturally gravitated to being hybrid. And I didn't actually set that out as that's what we're going to do. But when we had the office, it was come and go as you want. But we do have a good old fashioned notice board, number board, like you're saying, that's got what were our big objectives. And I should also be clear, there's something about keeping your objectives small and realistic. So don't have 20 big objectives, strategic objectives, because that's rubbish. You know, I say that all the time to boards and SMEs. You should really only have about 6 big objectives and then work your way down, because if there's too much, we get lost in it. But when we focus on things, performance improves. We like having that board up, but also when you're in person, you can huddle around the board. And I don't know whether you know or not, but there's a lot of research behind when you're doing performance meetings. And I know we're talking about an SMEs, but, you know, as you've already said, I was previously a chief exec of a very large multi-million-pound organisation. We moved to what we called stand-up meetings, and and that, even for me, is a really simple way that is not going to cost an SME any money, but is a simple and proven technique. Get people around the numbers, whether it's the end of the week, start of the week. Some people might do it in the morning. It depends on your business, doesn't it? Manufacturing, you know, I started my career in manufacturing. We always had the morning meeting on the shop floor, right? What are we doing? Where are we? For us, we don't do it every week, but we certainly do a bi-weekly. So every 2 weeks, we go through our numbers. Where are we? Lead, what's coming? What's it looking like? But we know when we stand people up that they're more energized and more focused. So isn't that interesting? But that's human beings. If we're stood up, we are more likely to take action.
Yeah. And you know, it reminds me, and it's not something that you'd be allowed to do now, but years and years and years ago when I was in sales, they used to do, it's awful that I say this now. So they used to have sales days where everybody had to stand up and your chair was taken away and you had to hit your KPI target to get your chair back. But it's the you obviously you can't do that now because you can't stop somebody sitting down when they're doing the job. But the principles were that whole, like you say, if you stood up, you are more energetic, you're more involved, you're more active, and so the theory behind it was right. Execution, not so much, but but it is. You're absolutely right. I mean, we do like a morning huddle because I've got a lot of part timers and everybody works different days and different hours. And I don't have a big team, but we actually all work very different. So every morning there is a morning 5-minute huddle to recap, well, what happened yesterday and what's the priorities for today, so that we don't drop the ball with anything and the service continues, but actually we know where we're at in terms of, like you say, those key objectives and that kind of thing. And then we do our month end review of what everything's done, figures, jobs, all that kind of stuff. And then individually in a one-to-one every month, which happens a few days after the month end, it's like, right, okay, so your part in that is, and let's discuss. So I do think that the more involved people feel, the more you're going to get out of them, because again, they see the reward of, oh, actually, if we've all done really well, look what happened. And they know their part. And I think it's that, is it, who was it? Somebody in NASA said something about looking after the janitor.
It's the man on the moon. So it's the famous, that allegedly, but who cares whether it's true or not, right? It's a great story. So that allegedly JFK was walking through NASA and saw the janitor mopping the floor and said, what do you do what do you do? Yeah. And he said, I'm here to put a man on the moon. Yeah. And it's exactly that, isn't it? That everyone in your business, whether it's 2, 10, 50, 250, but that everybody's got that, I call it, your big audacious goal. What's the big thing? And does everybody understand and feel valued in their role in delivering that? Yeah. So it's exactly that you're trying to achieve. That's not complicated, is it?
No, not at all. And I think it's the key thing for me as well is it's doing it in your way. You've got to be authentic. So if you're the business leader and you're trying to emulate somebody else, your people won't buy that because you're not you. So for me, when I've seen where it's gone wrong, because you'll have seen the same, it's gone wrong because either people have done it as a tick box and gone, well, yes, of course I've done that, I do this, this and this, and it's like, all right, okay, let's tick them boxes to say we do that. Or they're trying to go, well, if Richard Branson can say it like this, then I'll say it like that, but you're not Richard Branson or Alan Sugar or whoever you are. So I think you need to find your authentic voice and be true to yourself. And think back to either, why did you start this business? What was your goal then? Where are you striving to get to? Or why did you join the business if you're one of the business leaders? Or, what is it that makes you come to work every day? What are you striving for? And share that passion with the rest of the people, because I think if they see how passionate you are, it's contagious.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. I do a lot of work nationally around people who are aspiring exec directors, and I talk to them about what's your brand, not who I am, not who they are, but I get them to think very simply about what's your brand, what's your story, who are you? Because that's what people connect with, and what's the purpose behind the business. I think what's really important as well for our SME owners that might be listening is we are moving in terms of generations and what people expect. Now, we can all roll our eyes and talk about how it was in our day and look, I'm 50 and all of that. But when I started my career, it was very, very different. Yeah. And if we don't adapt and be curious and learn about the different generations and needs in our workforce, then I'm afraid people are not going to come to you. So I talk again, I'm just doing a strategy with a really exciting startup actually in London.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I've talked to them a bit about, so what's your offer to your employees? And of course, they've gone straight into financial reward. And I've said, okay, that's all really interesting, but you're going to be recruiting, they're a digital startup, so their demographic is going to be under 30s predominantly.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I said, what do you think under 30s want? Of course, all these 50-year-olds look at me like, we don't know. No, you don't know. So you're going to need to go and find out, because a lot of them are far more interested in what your kind of corporate social responsibility, ethics, values. They are not as driven by me, who would turn up and work all the hours God sent so that somebody would say she's done a good job.
Yeah.
It's not like that anymore. So, we're talking about productivity, and we've talked a bit about kind of the carrot and the stick. There's a big carrot for me about how do you really offer people a business that they can see is doing good. And people might be going, well, I don't want to do that. Well, that's okay. Don't do that. But accept then that you are probably limiting or reducing the pool of people. Younger people expect to work working hours. So, again, I've got a client just now who wants to know what they can do about the fact that these younger people, leave at 5. Well, that's a bit tricky, isn't it? Because from an HR perspective, that's what they're employed to do.
Yeah.
And so you've got to work on, how do you get people to want to go the extra mile? And you can't do that by simply telling them, that's what I did in my day.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right there. The next generation of workforce think about what's in it for me. And salary is not what's in it for them. Yes, they want to earn enough to live, and that's important, but they want to know, what are they doing that's making a difference? They want to know, like you say, your corporate social responsibility. They want to know what your sustainability goals are. They want to know that they've got a good work-life balance, and that is working regular hours, but what holidays am I getting? And if I wanted to take an extended holiday, could I work while I'm on holiday? Can I do that? Whatever it is, which, as you say, to the other generations, that goes against the grain, because, you and I are brought up in a world of, you work hard to get paid and you've got to prove yourself, and you should be thankful that you've got a job. But we're not in that world anymore. And, the candidates and employees have an element of control with that. So if you want to employ and retain the right people, you've got to flip to a different generation and go, okay, so if I've got a workforce who are over the age of 40, what's in it for them is different to those graduates that are coming in who are in their early 20s, under 30. They want different things. Now, we're in this position now of 5 generations in the workforce, which is ridiculous to think. But as a business owner, that's actually really scary, because that aging workforce who are retiring are very different to the likes of my son, who finishes university next year, who's, thinking about his career. And if I look at him, and then potentially, I mean, my stepdad is retired now, but if he could still be in the workplace, they're 2 very different people who learn in different ways, who value different things. So you have to, I think, adaptability now, and adapting what you're saying and how you're saying it, and your actions as a business owner need to be adapted for your audience. It's not what you want anymore. It's, how do I get them bought in and get them to see that? And actually, part of that might be doing things in different ways to the different audiences. It's not a one shoe fits all process anymore. So, and it's that, it's that whole thing of people learn in different ways, don't they? The what's it called, like the ordology, the one that begins with V. I can't remember the words.
Yeah. So I talk, people learn by, or so either kind of reading, either by writing it down, or people actually by kinetically by doing it.
Kinetic, kinetic, that's it. So I kind of always have that theory, and I sort of say to people, if you know that people learn in different ways, then, and you would change your approach to training because of that, why would you not train your approach to speaking to your people? Some people will be spoken to. Some people will want you to email it to them. Some people will want to do an away day. And actually, you've got to really think about, well, what do they want? It's not about what you want. Not when you're trying to get a message across. It's how do I get them bought in? And we do that here. So we try and do like month end little celebrations or quarterly, not necessarily away day, but we do something together. And we've done things like gone to an outdoor water park and done the inflatables, and we've done that. We've done zip wires, but similarly we've gone out for a lovely meal and had a nice few bottles of wine or whatever it is. We've been to London for the day or whatever. We've done lots and lots of different things, but you know what? I don't decide what that is. They do. They decide what they want to do, and we work up to that. I have never sat there and said, just so you guys know, this is what I've booked. Because if I want them to come, or if I want them engaged to get to that goal of this is what we're going to do, if the idea comes from them, they're more likely to be bought into it. So, I think that that's important. But the generational shift in terms of what they want and how they view a career now is very, very different. And to stay as an employer of choice, you've really got to factor that in.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I think, there's also something about, isn't there, the onboarding, which will be very dear to your heart. And we talked earlier about, how do you share with people really openly? I know it'll happen in the recruitment again. I'm sure you absolutely, I know you do talk to people about, what's your recruitment offer? It's much more than just here's the job, here's the hours, but actually, what do you tell them about the business, the culture, and what they're joining? But I do think as well, we miss then at the onboarding point, as they first come into an organisation, it's not just about hand me the equipment and a desk and a manual. I do think there's a real opportunity to continue that, whether it's them feeling emotionally invested in the team, whether you want to call it valued. We used to call it the psychological contract, didn't we? It's all the same thing. But how do you use that opportunity to get them to feel a real feel of the sense of the business, whilst also being honest about the expectations? Because you've got to keep setting expectations. And, again, people might be listening and thinking, so what, I just should bend over backwards and do what every single person wants? That is absolutely not what we're saying, is it? We are not saying that. But we're saying you should listen to people. You should consider individuals. And there will be times where you say, that is how we do things around here. And that's fine, because you've earned that kind of trust that this is where I'm very clear, but this is where we can be flexible, we can be individual. But, anybody joining my team, if they say, actually, I don't know, they might say, I just want to work every Monday and that's it. I'm going to say, I'm happy with you doing so many hours a week, but how restrictive are you on just a Monday? Because we might need some cover on occasions of holidays. So is there, there needs to be some give on it. So I just want to be clear that people listening don't think, I know you don't think that and I don't, but they're not thinking what I have to, I've got 100 people and I've got to do something for each individual. We need to consider each individual. You need to think about their needs, and you need to balance what might be this is our expectation and I'm going to state them clearly, and this is where we've got flexibility and where I can do it. I just don't think people have straightforward conversations, and people go away all muddled, grey, ambiguity, and then it all flares up because somebody says they're not doing what I asked of them. And then somebody like me goes in to do HR and ask them, and the other person says, well, that's not what I asked them to do. I thought they were doing this.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the challenge, because I think you and I, being external, sometimes we've got fresh eyes, and we can go into a business and go, well, to me, it's glaringly obvious what you need to change. But when they're in it, they can't see the wood for the trees. And I know, there's a lot of support I give business leaders on recruitment strategies, retention strategies, and, how to look at performance and how to manage the people better. And then obviously if it gets to a point where they need to involve you, I can refer them to you or whatever they're going to do. But I think you're right. Most people just don't have the conversations. And when you sit there and go, have you talked to them about this? And they go, no. No, I'm assuming, and that goes back to what you said at the beginning, that misstep. The business owner's assuming one thing and the employees assuming something else, or the group of employees are assuming something else. And it's that miscommunication. And that's, for me, every business I've worked with, once they have a simple conversation, suddenly things are different. But it's that fear of having them conversations, and that's the thing for me. But I think, kind of coming to that onboarding point that you said, actually onboarding, well, for me, I think at the moment that pre-boarding through notice periods, and that's vital to stop counter offers at the moment, because people are getting counter offered left, right and centre. So if you want to stop that counter offer, you need to be in regular contact throughout that notice. And if you're unlucky and they're on 3 months notice, that's a long time to pre-board somebody and keep them engaged, because they might end up getting a decent counter offer and staying. So that is vital. And then the onboarding bit is even more important, because what we see time and time again is if somebody's going to leave a job, it's because they've not been embedded within the culture within the first 12 weeks. You go into a new job, rabbit in the headlights, you don't know anybody, you don't know your job, you don't know anything. And if they plonk you on a desk with a computer and a manual going, right, crack on, and you sit there and go, not sure this is right for me, you're going to leave. Whereas a business who goes, look, I know you've come in to do something completely different. Let's bring you into this slowly but surely. But today what we're going to do is I'm going to get you to sit with this team, and you're going to get to know them, and you're going to watch them, and you're going to do that, and then we'll have a debrief. And then tomorrow what I'm going to do is introduce you to those people, and then we're going to do, and it's changing it up. And it's, I spoke to one business and advised them, as they were, I think they had about 50 people in the business, so they weren't huge, and they didn't really have an onboarding procedure. It was very much of, I've got the IT ready, and whoever sat next to them's going to show them what to do, which happens time and time again. And they didn't have HR, but the director was the person that we tended to work with when it came to recruitment. But once the person started, the director didn't have anything to do with them. So I'd suggested a procedure that was very, very simple, and it included things like, have you got a crib sheet of all the acronyms you use? Because you will use acronyms and jargon and all sorts of stuff, and that person's going to come in and not know what any of that means. So have we got something like that we can discuss with them and talk to them about? And is there a day that you, as the director, the managing director, owner, CEO, is going to sit down and have a conversation with them, so that they know your role, and that you become a human being and you're not just the person at the end of an email? And are they going to spend time with different people? Because then the burden is not on one person to show them what to do. So, if somebody in accounts is available to sit and go through all the payroll stuff with them, that would be amazing. And make sure it's done accurately and correctly, because they know what they're looking for. And, and let them observe, let them do classroom learning, let them go and sit with people, let them do lots of different things. And very, very quickly, there was, a few weeks of the onboarding and the training, and it was just sort of structured. And then, but it was flexible, it could adapt, it could change depending on the needs of the business and things like that. And that candidate at the end of it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I've got to the end of all of this. I now know who every member of staff is, because I've spent time with different teams, different departments. They know who I am. And I've learned different things from different people, because, everybody does something slightly different, and you find your way. And it just worked so much better. But because it was thought about, and it was who could do what and what value would that add to the new employee, it really made a difference.
And I suppose, it kind of brings me to, my kind of thinking about a final point as for these SMEs, that, I'll often hear people almost have a badge of honor, right? Of, well, I don't need HR in our business, because, we haven't got any problems. Okay, well, exactly. Okay, well, good luck with that, because at the point that you do have a problem, it's going to be really expensive and significant, because that's what always happens. They suddenly knock on my door and I find out this person's, I don't know, been a problem for 4 years. They were never properly onboarded. How did you recruit them? Who's spoken to them? And suddenly you go, well, this is going to be costly and I haven't got a magic wand. But I'm also really intrigued that people see it as a badge of honour that they haven't got any problems, because I'll also say, yeah, but what about opportunities?
Yeah.
So, what's the ROI? Well, actually, it's very well researched, isn't it? That through, the recruitment, the pre-boarding, the onboarding that you talk about that comes into then looking after your people while they work for you, dealing with issues quickly and appropriately, they absolutely ensure that your business, you keep people work hard, people work for you, you don't have all of those issues, and they're costly. Even if you don't go to a tribunal, you will have sick days that cost a fortune, or as we started at the beginning, you will have people doing below their 100% productivity, probably working at about 50%. And if you've got a number of people in a small business who are not giving their all, you've got a problem.
Yeah. And I think that's the important thing. And the purpose of today's podcast is for people to probably listen and go, hang on a minute, I've got people who are doing that, and that's a really good idea. So I think we've got really good advice and guidance that we've talked about, and we can probably talk for England and go on and on and on. But obviously, time is of the essence. We have a short podcast to record. So, we've talked a lot about don't avoid the conversation. When you're looking at your strategic objectives, don't have any more than about 5 or 6, don't have 27 of them. I love the idea of the stand-up meetings, very, very simple, and it's free, but not the sales days that I used to have to do. So definitely don't do them. Looking at the generational changes and how you're phrasing things, what's important to the new generations coming through, because it's different to your older generations, and that onboarding. And I think ultimately, as you said at the very beginning, don't be afraid to let somebody get off the bus. Don't keep somebody for the sake of it. Just because they've been with you for 10 years doesn't mean that they should stay. If it's not right for you and it's not right for them and their productivity is down, let them go.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, amazing. It's been brilliant talking to you today, Nat, and thank you so much for your time. Everybody who's listening, don't forget to like and follow, and there will be more episodes coming very soon.